Men, over 50, use bicarbonate this way to restore blood flow. Many men over the age of 50 find themselves experiencing persistent fatigue, even when they believe they're getting adequate sleep. The feeling of heavy legs, a decline in mental sharpness, and a general decrease in physical performance are often dismissed as simply the natural consequences of aging. However, as Dr. Rachel Ross, a board-certified urologist with a specialization in men's health, blood flow, hormones, and longevity, explains, this is a common misconception. She emphasizes that declining blood flow is rarely an inevitable part of aging, and that numerous men in her clinic attribute their symptoms to age, believing that issues like stiffness, fatigue, and reduced performance are merely the cost of living past 50. While this perspective seems logical, as bodies naturally age and wear down over time, Dr. Ross's clinical experience paints a different picture. She has observed that circulation problems frequently begin long before any arterial blockages occur, and the initial culprits are seldom cholesterol. The onset of diminished blood flow is typically a slow, silent, and almost imperceptible process. Individuals do not suddenly wake up one morning with poor circulation. Rather, their bodies begin to exhibit subtle signals. These might include extremities feeling colder than usual, legs fatiguing more rapidly during walks, a loss of firmness or consistency in erections, a diminished pump during workouts, a pervading sense of mental fog, and inexplicable dips in energy. These symptoms often manifest well in advance of any formal diagnosis of a circulatory problem by a cardiologist. Dr. Ross clarifies that healthy circulation is not solely about the patency of arteries, often likened to plumbing. Instead, it is a complex interplay of three crucial systems: nitric oxide signaling, the flexibility of blood vessels, and the body's internal pH balance. While nitric oxide, the molecule responsible for signaling blood vessels to relax and dilate, is frequently discussed, the other two systems are often overlooked. The efficacy of nitric oxide signaling is intrinsically linked to the flexibility of the vessel walls, which in turn is heavily influenced by the chemical environment that surrounds these vessels on a daily basis. Therefore, aging itself is not the primary determinant of vascular health. Rather, it is the biochemical milieu in which the body operates. Dr. Ross frequently informs her patients that their arteries do not suddenly deteriorate at a specific age, but rather lose flexibility gradually over decades. This loss of flexibility is typically not initiated by plaque buildup, but by constant, low-grade stress within the bloodstream. This stress is often a consequence of acidity, inflammation, and hormonal imbalances. As men age, several factors can subtly shift the body towards a more acidic state. These include diets high in protein without sufficient buffering minerals, chronic psychological stress that elevates cortisol levels, insufficient sleep that impedes nightly repair processes, and persistent inflammation that never fully subsides. Individually, these factors may not seem significant, but collectively, they gradually alter the behavior of blood vessels. When the internal environment becomes even mildly acidic, blood vessels stiffen, not become blocked, leading to a diminished responsiveness to nitric oxide. The signal may be transmitted, but the tissues are less capable of receiving and acting upon it. This explains why many men receive normal lab results, yet experience symptoms that indicate otherwise. It also sheds light on why certain medications might not fully address the root cause. While these drugs may enhance nitric oxide availability or improve blood pressure readings, they fail to restore the fundamental chemical environment in which the vessels operate. This can be likened to increasing the volume on a radio with damaged speakers. The signal might be louder, but the audio clarity does not improve. This situation can lead to significant confusion for many men who diligently follow prescribed treatments, exercise regularly, and monitor their cholesterol, yet still experience weak circulation, fading energy, and declining performance. The issue is not their adherence to advice, but the unaddressed internal chemistry. The critical role of pH balance in circulation is frequently underestimated. The body constantly strives to maintain a narrow pH range essential for the proper functioning of enzymes, muscles, nerves, and blood vessels. Even minor deviations from this optimal range can manifest first in systems reliant on rapid relaxation and contraction, with blood vessels being a prime example. Mild metabolic acidity can reduce the efficiency of nitric oxide signaling, not by eliminating it entirely, but by dampening its effect. This means vessels might open only partially rather than fully, leading to reduced oxygen delivery and faster muscle fatigue. Over time, the body adapts to this diminished circulation, accepting it as the new norm. This is where bicarbonate enters the discussion, not as a panacea or a fleeting trend, but as one of the body's principal buffering molecules, a compound utilized daily by the kidneys and pancreas to maintain internal equilibrium. The body naturally uses bicarbonate to neutralize excess acid. However, with advancing age, increased stress, and modern dietary habits, the demand for bicarbonate can often outstrip its supply. When this occurs, circulation can suffer long before any conventional medical markers signal a problem. Dr. Ross highlights a crucial point. Blood vessels respond to changes in bicarbonate levels well before laboratory numbers reflect these alterations, predating the onset of disease or irreversible damage. Bicarbonate is far more than just a kitchen staple for heartburn relief. Within the male body, it plays an instrumental role in circulation, oxygen delivery, and the vascular system's ability to respond to increased blood flow demands. Long before its common use as baking soda, bicarbonate served as a fundamental survival mechanism. The kidneys and pancreas continuously produce bicarbonate, not as a supplemental treatment, but as an intrinsic buffering system designed to maintain stable internal chemistry. Without it, blood would become excessively acidic, hindering cellular function, muscle contraction, nerve impulse transmission, and the crucial relaxation of blood vessels. One of bicarbonate's primary functions is pH buffering, acting as a stabilizer. Every metabolic process, from protein digestion and exercise to stress hormone release and inflammation, generates acid. Bicarbonate neutralizes this excess, ensuring tissues remain functional. Effective buffering translates to smooth circulation, while its impairment initiates subtle systemic issues. Bicarbonate also plays a vital role in the efficient removal of carbon dioxide from tissues. As muscles work, they produce carbon dioxide, which must be carried away to allow for the uptake of fresh oxygen. Bicarbonate acts as a shuttle, facilitating this vital exchange. A deficiency can lead to lingering CO2, reduced oxygen delivery, and premature fatigue. This directly impacts how red blood cells release oxygen. In a balanced chemical environment, oxygen is readily released to working muscles and organs. However, in an acidic environment, this process becomes inefficient. Oxygen remains bound longer, tissues receive less, and the body compensates by reducing overall output, resulting in shortness of breath, diminished endurance, and a sensation of heavy legs. The efficiency of nitric oxide signaling is also intertwined with pH. While nitric oxide signals blood vessels to relax, this signal's effectiveness depends on the surrounding chemical milieu. Under acidic conditions, blood vessels become less responsive. The endothelial lining, the delicate inner surface of arteries, reacts less robustly to the nitric oxide signal. The message is sent, but the response is muted, causing vessels to constrict subtly, thereby reducing blood flow. Over time, this reduced responsiveness becomes the new baseline. This is a key reason why two men with identical cholesterol levels can experience vastly different physiological sensations. A fundamental physiological principle at play is that as acidity increases, the vascular smooth muscle responsible for vessel dilation and constriction remains partially tightened, failing to achieve full relaxation. This results in less adaptable circulation, meaning blood flow during exercise, sexual arousal, or cognitive exertion never reaches its full potential. This is particularly significant for men over 50, as kidney buffering efficiency naturally declines with age. While the organs continue to function, their response time slows, and carbon dioxide clearance weakens. Recovery between periods of exertion takes longer, and mild metabolic acidosis becomes surprisingly prevalent, not severe enough to cause overt disease, but sufficient to impair performance. The outcome is a familiar experience for many: reduced stamina, a less pronounced muscle pump during workouts, and sluggish blood flow to the extremities, including hands, feet, and pelvic tissues. Even with continued activity and exercise, the body no longer responds as it once did. Dr. Ross explains this to her patients by illustrating that when bicarbonate levels decrease, blood vessels do not open to their full capacity, even if the arteries themselves are structurally sound. The hardware may be intact, but the operating software is not optimized. Supporting bicarbonate availability is not intended to replace medications or treat diseases directly. Instead, its purpose is to improve the internal chemical environment, enabling the body's existing systems to function as intended, leading to better vessel responsiveness, enhanced oxygen delivery, greater exercise tolerance, and reduced fatigue from equivalent efforts. When the environment is optimized, the body naturally enhances its own processes. However, a critical caveat exists. Bicarbonate can only be beneficial if used correctly, and this is where many men inadvertently undermine their efforts. The common mistake involves a lack of understanding of proper usage. Some men try bicarbonate once, experience no noticeable effects, and conclude it is ineffective. Others may consume excessive amounts, leading to gastrointestinal discomfort, bloating, or nausea, prompting them to abandon it altogether. In the vast majority of cases, the issue lies not with bicarbonate itself, but with its method and timing of use. Dr. Ross has witnessed individuals dismiss potentially beneficial interventions due to incorrect application, which is understandable given the often confusing online advice that turns physiological tools into a matter of trial and error. One of the most frequent errors is consuming bicarbonate with large meals. This action immediately neutralizes stomach acid, diverting the bicarbonate's role to digestive aid rather than its systemic buffering function. The body then prioritizes managing digestion, leaving insufficient bicarbonate available in the bloodstream for circulation support. Another common misstep is excessive dosing. The principle of more is better does not apply here. In fact, excessive bicarbonate intake can overwhelm the digestive system, causing side effects before any circulatory benefits can manifest. The body's response is to rapidly excrete the excess, effectively nullifying the intended effect. Furthermore, daily, uninterrupted use without strategic cycling can be counterproductive. The body is remarkably adaptable, and constant buffering support can lead to a downregulation of its natural buffering mechanisms. Instead of assisting physiology, it can diminish the body's own buffering capacity. Strategic support differs significantly from chronic intake. Timing is a factor that most men underestimate. Insulin levels influence the movement of minerals and buffering agents into cells. Consuming bicarbonate at the wrong time can redirect it away from vascular tissues. The function of stomach acid also plays a role. The body requires adequate acidity for digestion and nutrient absorption. Disrupting this process too frequently can create new health issues. This underscores the importance of distinguishing between digestive buffering, which occurs in the stomach, and systemic buffering, which takes place in the blood and tissues. The objective is not to eliminate acid entirely, but to maintain balance where circulation depends on it. Hydration is another often overlooked component. Bicarbonate does not function in isolation. It requires adequate fluid balance to circulate effectively within the bloodstream. Dehydration concentrates acidity and diminishes buffering capacity. Many men experience mild dehydration without realizing it, further reducing bicarbonate's effectiveness. It is also imperative to emphasize safety. The information provided is educational and not a substitute for medical advice. Individuals with kidney disease, sodium sensitivity, or those taking blood pressure medications should always consult their physician before using any buffering compounds. These physiological systems are interconnected, and professional guidance is essential. When bicarbonate is utilized strategically and conservatively, low-dose support can contribute to improved exercise performance, enhanced blood flow, better muscle oxygenation, and accelerated post-activity recovery. The positive effects are most pronounced when combined with physical activity, such as walking, light resistance training, or breathing exercises that naturally stimulate circulation. Bicarbonate does not independently generate blood flow. Rather, it optimizes the internal environment, allowing blood flow to occur more efficiently when the body signals the need for it. Crucially, bicarbonate alone does not fully restore circulation. Its efficacy is contingent upon its synergy with a vital biological trigger, the signal that prompts blood vessels to dilate in the first place. Dr. Ross points out that bicarbonate prepares the internal environment, but another mechanism must initiate the actual vasodilation. This trigger is activation, which occurs when the body receives signals to open blood vessels. The primary signal is nitric oxide, which is stimulated through movement, muscle contraction, and breathing, not through pills, powders, or shortcuts. Blood flow is not something to be forced, but rather invited. When muscles contract, they send a strong signal to adjacent blood vessels to widen. This explains why even light physical activity can significantly enhance circulation. Walking, in particular, is a profoundly underrated therapeutic tool for men over 50. It gently stimulates nitric oxide production without unduly stressing joints or the nervous system. Each step acts as a pump, facilitating venous return to the heart and propelling oxygenated blood into tissues that may have been chronically undersupplied. Nasal breathing also plays a role, as the sinuses naturally produce nitric oxide. Breathing through the nose, especially during physical activity, increases circulating nitric oxide levels, a benefit bypassed by mouth breathing. These subtle daily habits have a profound impact on physiological outcomes. Bicarbonate can amplify this process by creating a more conducive internal environment where blood vessels respond more robustly to nitric oxide signals. Exercise-induced vasodilation becomes more pronounced, post-workout circulation improves, and recovery accelerates. Muscles feel warmer, more relaxed, and more responsive, allowing the body to reacquaint itself with its optimal functioning. The role of certain minerals should also be considered. Magnesium, for instance, aids in the relaxation of vascular smooth muscle. Potassium-rich foods support cellular signaling. These are not miraculous cures, but foundational nutrients essential for the proper mechanics of circulation. Sleep and breathing are also directly linked to this system. During deep sleep, blood vessels repair their lining, and nitric oxide sensitivity is recalibrated. Insufficient sleep disrupts this restorative process, leading to stiffer vessels the following day. Evening circulation is more significant than many men realize. Improved blood flow later in the day can lead to stronger nighttime erections and deeper, more restorative sleep. These are indicators of vascular health, extending beyond mere sexual function. Dr. Ross often advises her patients that circulation is not about forceful exertion, but about creating an inviting environment. When the optimal conditions are met, through movement, hydration, proper breathing, and buffering, the body responds swiftly. The actionable framework does not need to be extreme. Gentle daily movement, light resistance training a few times a week, strategic hydration earlier in the day to avoid chronic dehydration that exacerbates acidity, and supporting the body's natural buffering systems instead of overwhelming them are key. When these elements work in concert, circulation often improves more rapidly than expected, not by reversing age, but by reestablishing communication between systems that had gradually fallen out of sync. If you find yourself questioning whether it is too late to make these improvements, Dr. Ross wants to assure you that it is not. Whether you are 55, 65, or even 75, the hopeful truth is that circulation can adapt at any age. Blood vessels are living tissues, not static structures. They respond to signals. When those signals improve, the body's response can be remarkably swift. This has been consistently observed in her practice with men who believed their decline was irreversible and that the opportunity for improvement had passed. They had accepted fatigue, cold limbs, diminished performance, and waning stamina as permanent consequences. However, when the internal environment was optimized and circulation was supported rather than forced, their bodies responded positively. You are not broken, nor are you failing. Your body has adapted to decades of stress, poor sleep, inflammation, acidity, and overload, a necessary adaptation for survival. Yet adaptation is not destiny. Signals can change, and physiological responses follow suit. Young blood vessels are not a prerequisite for effective function. They require clarity, flexibility, and consistent communication. As nitric oxide signaling improves and the internal environment becomes more supportive, vessels begin to dilate more fully again. Warmth returns, endurance increases, and mental sharpness often sharpens as blood flow to the brain improves. What often surprises men is the speed at which these changes can occur. Dr. Ross has witnessed men in their 60s and 70s respond more quickly than men decades younger, not because their physical condition was inherently superior, but because their systems had been deprived for so long that even minor improvements yielded significant results. This is not about chasing youth, but about restoring physiological function. She has seen men regain energy, stamina, warmth, and confidence, not by pushing harder, but by removing the internal resistance that had been holding their bodies back. There is inherent dignity in prioritizing one's health. Strength is a form of stewardship. The desire for sustained energy upon waking, stability in gait, and clarity of thought is not vanity, but a fundamental aspect of well-being. Health is a responsibility to oneself and to those who depend on you. Longevity, in essence, is leadership. By caring for your body, you demonstrate resilience to your family and show that aging does not necessitate surrender, but rather wise adaptation. Extreme protocols, self-recrimination, or the pressure to overhaul everything at once are unnecessary. What is required are understanding and consistency. This brings us back to the initial question, is it too late? Dr. Ross reiterates that it is not. Whether you are 55, 65, or 75, the hopeful truth is that circulation can adapt at any age. Blood vessels are living, dynamic tissues that respond to signals. When these signals improve, the body's response can far exceed expectations. This has been a consistent observation in her practice. Men who presented with the conviction that their decline was irreversible, men who quietly believed the opportunity had passed, and men who had resigned themselves to fatigue, cold extremities, weakness, and fading performance as the inevitable outcome of aging, all have experienced positive changes when the internal environment was addressed and circulation was supported. You are not broken or failing. Your body has been meticulously trained over decades to adapt to stress, inadequate sleep, inflammation, acidity, and the demands of daily life. This adaptation has been crucial for your survival and continued functioning. However, adaptation is not a predetermined fate. Signals can change and physiological responses will follow. Effective blood vessel function does not depend on youth, but on flexibility, adequate oxygen supply, and the chemical environment that permits relaxation. When nitric oxide signaling is enhanced and the internal milieu becomes less hostile, blood vessels begin to dilate more fully. Circulation improves, warmth returns to the extremities, and endurance increases. Even cognitive function often sharpens as cerebral blood flow is optimized. The speed at which these changes can occur often surprises men. Dr. Ross has observed men in their 60s and 70s respond more rapidly than younger individuals, not due to superior physical conditioning, but because their systems, having been deprived for so long, reacted significantly to even minor improvements. This journey is not about striving for an artificial state of youth, but about restoring fundamental physiological processes. She has witnessed men regain energy, stamina, warmth, and confidence, not by pushing their bodies to extremes or training as if they were decades younger, but by removing the internal obstacles that had been silently hindering them. There is profound dignity in proactively managing one's health. Strength is a form of stewardship. The desire for stable energy, robust circulation, and clear cognitive function is not a pursuit of vanity, but a responsible approach to well-being. Health is the foundation upon which you remain present for your family, your partner, and your life's purpose. Longevity, in essence, is an act of leadership. By nurturing your body, you embody resilience and demonstrate that aging does not signify surrender, but rather the acquisition of wisdom. Extreme or punitive regimens are unnecessary, as are feelings of guilt or shame. The objective is not to achieve perfection overnight, but to cultivate understanding and consistency. This brings us back to the central theme of the initial inquiry. Dr. Ross wants to impress upon you that it is not too late. Whether you are 55, 65, or 75, the most hopeful medical insight is that circulation is adaptable at any age. Blood vessels are dynamic living tissues, not static entities frozen in time. They respond to signals. When those signals improve, the body's response can be far more rapid than most men anticipate. This has been a consistent pattern in her clinical experience. Men who entered her office convinced that their decline was irreversible, men who quietly believed their window of opportunity had closed, and men who accepted fatigue, cold extremities, reduced physical capacity, and waning performance as an inescapable aspect of aging, have all experienced positive transformations when the internal environment was addressed and circulation was supported. You are not fundamentally broken or flawed. Your body has been meticulously conditioned over many years to adapt to various stressors, including inadequate sleep, inflammation, acidity, and the relentless demands of daily life. This adaptive capacity has been essential for your continued functioning and forward momentum. However, adaptation is not an immutable destiny. Signals can be altered, and when signals change, physiological responses inevitably follow. Blood vessels do not require youth to function optimally. They need flexibility, sufficient oxygenation, and the chemical environment that allows them to relax. As nitric oxide signaling improves and the internal environment becomes more conducive, blood vessels begin to dilate more effectively. Circulation enhances, warmth returns to the hands and feet, and endurance increases. Even mental clarity frequently sharpens as blood flow to the brain improves. What often surprises men is the swiftness of these positive changes. Dr. Ross has observed men in their 60s and 70s exhibit faster recoveries than individuals decades younger. This is not attributed to superior physical prowess, but to the fact that their systems, having been deprived for an extended period, responded profoundly to even modest improvements. This endeavor is not about recapturing a youthful state, but about restoring fundamental physiological processes. She has witnessed men regain energy, stamina, warmth, and confidence, not through arduous exertion or training as if they were in their prime, but by removing the internal impediments that had been subtly undermining their well-being. There is an inherent dignity in taking proactive care of one's health. Strength is a form of stewardship, not vanity. The desire for consistent energy, strong circulation, and clear thought processes is a responsible pursuit of well-being. Health is the bedrock upon which you can actively participate in your family life, your relationships, and your personal aspirations. Longevity, in this context, represents a form of leadership. By investing in your physical health, you demonstrate resilience and convey that aging is not a process of decline, but of acquiring wisdom and adaptability. Extreme or punishing regimens are unnecessary, as are feelings of guilt or shame. The goal is not to achieve perfection instantaneously, but to cultivate understanding and maintain consistency. This leads us back to the core question posed at the outset. Dr. Ross wishes for you to understand clearly that it is not too late for you. Whether you are 55, 65, or even 75, one of the most encouraging truths in medicine is that circulation can adapt at any age. Blood vessels are dynamic, living tissues that respond to signals. When those signals are improved, the body's response can occur far more rapidly than most men anticipate. This has been repeatedly observed in her clinical practice. Men who entered her office with a firm belief that their physical decline was irreversible, men who quietly accepted that the opportunity for improvement had passed, and men who resigned themselves to fatigue, cold extremities, diminished physical capacity, and waning performance as an unavoidable consequence of aging have all experienced significant positive changes once the internal environment was optimized and circulation was supported. You are not fundamentally broken or failing. Your body has been meticulously conditioned over decades to adapt to stress, inadequate sleep, inflammation, acidity, and the cumulative demands of life. This adaptive capacity has been crucial for your ongoing functioning and your ability to move forward. However, adaptation does not dictate an immutable future. Signals can be altered, and when signals change, physiological responses invariably follow. Blood vessels do not need to be young to function effectively. They require flexibility, adequate oxygenation, and the chemical environment that permits them to relax. As nitric oxide signaling improves and the internal environment becomes more amenable, blood vessels begin to dilate more fully, circulation improves, warmth returns to the extremities, and endurance increases. Even cognitive clarity often sharpens as blood flow to the brain is enhanced. What frequently surprises men is the speed at which these positive transformations can occur. Dr. Ross has witnessed men in their 60s and 70s respond more quickly than individuals decades younger. This is not due to superior physical conditioning, but rather to the fact that their systems, having been deprived for an extended period, reacted profoundly to even modest improvements. This pursuit is not about reclaiming a lost youth, but about restoring fundamental physiological processes. She has observed men regain energy, stamina, warmth, and confidence, not by pushing their bodies to extreme limits or training as if they were in their 20s, but by removing the internal obstacles that had been silently hindering their progress. There is profound dignity in taking proactive care of one's health. Strength is a form of stewardship, not vanity. The desire for sustained energy, robust circulation, and clear cognitive function is not a frivolous pursuit, but a responsible approach to well-being. Health is the foundation upon which you can remain actively engaged with your family, your partner, and your life's purpose. Longevity, in this context, can be viewed as an act of leadership. By nurturing your body, you embody resilience and demonstrate that aging does not signify surrender, but rather the acquisition of wisdom and adaptability. Extreme or punishing regimens are unnecessary, as are feelings of guilt or shame. The objective is not to achieve perfection instantaneously, but to cultivate understanding and maintain consistency. This brings us back to the central theme of the initial inquiry. Dr. Ross wants to impress upon you that it is not too late for you. Whether you are 55, 65, or even 75, one of the most encouraging truths in medicine is that circulation can adapt at any age. Blood vessels are dynamic, living tissues that respond to signals. When those signals improve, the body's response can occur far more rapidly than most men anticipate. This has been repeatedly observed in her clinical practice. Men who entered her office with a firm belief that their physical decline was irreversible, men who quietly accepted that the opportunity for improvement had passed, and men who resigned themselves to fatigue, cold extremities, diminished physical capacity, and waning performance as an unavoidable consequence of aging, have all experienced significant positive changes once the internal environment was optimized and circulation was supported. You are not fundamentally broken or failing. Your body has been meticulously conditioned over decades to adapt to stress, inadequate sleep, inflammation, acidity, and the cumulative demands of life. This adaptive capacity has been crucial for your ongoing functioning and your ability to move forward. However, adaptation does not dictate an immutable future. Signals can be altered, and when signals change, physiological responses invariably follow. Blood vessels do not need to be young to function effectively. They require flexibility, adequate oxygenation, and the chemical environment that permits them to relax. As nitric oxide signaling improves and the internal environment becomes more amenable, blood vessels begin to dilate more fully. Circulation improves, warmth returns to the extremities, and endurance increases. Even cognitive clarity often sharpens as blood flow to the brain improves. What frequently surprises men is the speed at which these positive transformations can occur. Dr. Ross has witnessed men in their 60s and 70s respond more quickly than individuals decades younger. This is not due to superior physical conditioning, but rather to the fact that their systems, having been deprived for an extended period, reacted profoundly to even modest improvements. This pursuit is not about recapturing a youthful state, but about restoring fundamental physiological processes. She has observed men regain energy, stamina, warmth, and confidence, not by pushing their bodies to extreme limits or training as if they were in their 20s, but by removing the internal obstacles that had been silently hindering their progress. This channel exists to empower you to understand your body rather than struggle against it, to provide clarity instead of instilling fear, and to help you navigate the aging process with strength, confidence, and dignity. Prioritize your health because you are intrinsically valuable, and I look forward to sharing more insights with you in the next discussion.